I don't know, I've ever started a habits show talking about the mental aspect of life, but just coming off talking about your book, Chatter, and the voices in our head, I want to start there. I mean, so you, as you have talked about so openly in the book, that you are an expert in this category, and you're also a human that daily struggles with it, and you've had some significant valleys of your own, journey within here. So today, as you wake up and look at your daily habits and how are you going to keep the chatter away or where you want it to be harnessed, as we talked about in the first one, what are some of the mental habits that you employ to do so?
Well, there's nothing I do preemptively
Okay.
aside from. So I think what I just said. There's nothing I do except for this. What
Except for this. Right.
what I mean by that is so, in part because part of what I do in my research and writing is research tools for managing chatter. I know about what these different tools are, and I've tried a lot about them. I've tried many of those out in my own life, right? It's hard not to know about these tools and then try to give them a shot. And so I've got a game plan for what to do when chatter begins to brew that I don't really have to think about implementing. And I think that gives me a real advantage because I don't like when I find myself starting to worry about something or ruminate, I don't have to stop and think, what am I going to do? Is there anything I can do? I know exactly what to do. And so the first thing I do is we talked about this during the other episode. I try to give myself advice using my own name, try to work through a problem. I try to put it in perspective. I think about how I'm going to feel about this down the road. It's remarkable to me. Like sometimes I've got some really, really stress provoking engagements on the horizon. No matter what it is, I think about how am I going to feel a week after it. It usually takes that edge off.
Yeah.
If those two tools don't do the trick, then I've got like on my speed dial 3 or 4 people who I consider to be my chatter advisors. And what I mean by that is these aren't just people who I'm really close to and who I can trust and who care about me. They're people who consistently do two things when I call them up and I need some help with a problem I'm dealing with. They take some time to listen to me and learn about what I'm going through, so they show empathy, but they don't just get me to express my emotions. They also work with me to help put my experience in perspective. So they, in a certain sense, try to break me out of the chatter. They're not clinical psychologists. They're just very intuitive people who know how to advise others well. And so I'll go to my chatter advisors if I need an additional dose of support. And I'll also I'll go for a walk in a green space around my house because we know that that can help too. And 9 times out of 10, implementing some combination of those tools is all I need to do. And I don't get stuck in a chatter episode as a result.
Well, and that hits the categories, the three categories that you talked about in our first show together, the things you can do by yourself, for yourself, the things that involve other people, and then environment. So you just walked us down those. We also talked in the first one, you asked me the question of kind of around my awareness and ability. And I said, gosh, in some areas, I feel like a rock star. In other areas, I'm not so strong. I'll ask the same thing there with you with chatter, assuming that there's some areas where, man, you kind of got it nailed. You've got that down. You've gotten masterful in the chatter in this area. Where is your Achilles heel of knowing, man, that's where I'm most in danger, most fragile, in essence?
Yeah, for me, it tends to be like health and well-being of my loved ones. That's
Hmm.
where those are my chatter triggers. And like you, in many other circumstances, I feel like I'm Yoda-esque when it
Yeah.
comes to chatter,
Yeah.
right? Um, Without the grovelly voice, maybe. But when it comes to like my kids' well-being, or my wife or family, that can be the source of more chatter.
Of
But
literal worry.
yeah, oh yeah, I can worry about that stuff and have to use more tools to rein that in than than um, than chatter that might occur in another context. So this doesn't mean
Uh,
that I never experience chatter about work, I might get a little nervous about something, but I can usually nip that in the bud really fast. And so the health stuff is a little bit more disconcerting.
So on this, again, I'm asking you your personal habits, but I'm going to keep asking your counsel on the topic that you're an expert in, that you're saying that if you know that about yourself, so you have awareness. So Ethan has awareness that when it comes to the health and well-being of his family, you can have the propensity to worry. So that's one, when the topic comes up, you take some emotional affirmative action towards. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. I think rather than just use two tools, I'll
Yeah.
use four tools, and I'll know that I have to use those four tools. So to be a little bit more concrete there,
Yeah.
going into that people tools bucket, like calling up the advisors, the chatter
Yeah.
advisors, that's not my first line of defense usually, because that takes a little bit more effort, and I don't want to inconvenience other people. I don't
Right.
want to abuse that set of tools. If it's, if I'm worried about something with my kids' health, I'll go straight to that people bucket tools. I won't delay. And it really does help. And so one point here though is that I have different sets of tools that I'm using to deal with different situations. And I have I'm deliberate about this. Like, I don't have to wait to find those other tools. I know exactly where to go. We actually just did a study recently looking at how people cope with chatter surrounding COVID-19. And one of the interesting things we found was the more tools people used, the better. So what really distinguished people who were the least anxious on a daily basis from those who were the most was the least anxious people. They were using the most healthy tools, whereas the people who were the most anxious, they're using lots of unhealthy tools.
Yeah. I'm thinking about just the easy, quick medications that I go to numb or distract as opposed to recover.
Yeah, and usually those numbing and distracting tools aren't great long term. But what I love about so much of the research in this space, Kevin, is that a lot of the non-medical tools, the thinking tools, the environmental tools that are out there, they're not hard to use. Many of them are really, really simple,
Yeah.
right? We're just not aware of them. They're, in a certain sense, hidden in plain sight. So like using your name to coach yourself through a problem, this is
Yeah.
not a hard thing to do. We've done neuroscience research on this. Like, it is not overly effortful to switch from thinking about your life using I, the way we typically do, to using your name. And yet it has benefits. Another tool we didn't talk about, but that I also sometimes use is um, I'll organize my spaces when I'm experiencing chatter. I'll clean up and organize, which for me is pretty out of character because although my office looks like it's relatively well organized right
It's
now.
looking good from this direction.
Yeah. You want to see, should I just turn it over?
Divulge? Okay.
Yeah. Can you see?
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have my desk in my view either.
Yeah. So, it's a disaster in the other directions. And normally I'm totally fine by that. Like, I'm the kind of guy who gets out of the shower, towel here, socks there, drives my wife crazy, doesn't bother me one bit.
Yeah.
But when I experience a little bit of chatter, I put everything away. I make it nice and neat. And we know that that's a tool. It can help people. It provides people with a sense of control that we often feel like we don't have when our mind is taking the reins, so to speak. But think about how easy it is to just tidy up your space. Super simple, probably easier than pouring a drink and imbibing it, right? And yet, because people don't know about these tools, I think they're less likely to use them.
Yeah, I'm thinking help the chatter, get rid of the clutter. I do that as well. That's the few times that I'll ever tidy up is that.
You and me both.
Yeah, but going to the environment, I live up in a national forest. I go outside. I had an incident a couple of days ago and I left the meeting. I drove to a trail, walked out for 15 minutes and just sat on a rock for, I don't even know how long. And just, that's where I went to get my help. Well, hey, you talked about health and wellness in regards to your family, but I will just on the personal side, your habits for your own health and wellness. And you talked about in the first show, you made a mention of, it sounded like working out, doing some sets, some reps, whatever. So what
Mhm.
does Ethan Kross do to keep yourself, what do you do on the health and wellness front? What are your habits?
Um, well, during normal times, non-COVID, which hopefully
Mm-hmm.
we're getting back to, I will do high intensity interval training
Yeah.
early in the morning. So I'll drop my kid off at school. I'll do this Orange Theory class, which I love. Then I will also and I'll walk to work, which is about a mile and a half each way, and sometimes I'll go a little bit further. And if I can do both of those things, which I usually am able to do, um, that I'm a really happy camper for a variety of reasons. Some of which are, my pants feel less tight, which makes me feel nice. A
Yeah.
couple months into COVID, some of my shirts were a little snug. Like it wasn't
Uh-huh.
a nice feeling. I was getting a heartburn for the first time in my life. So
Yeah.
I don't like those physical experiences, but
Yeah.
but um, but exercising and eating well have always been a part of my daily routine.
That's been one of my great accountability factors throughout my, as I've gotten older, is I'm not going to go buy bigger pants. So it's just, I
Yes.
draw a line there.
Well, and
But
but here's the problem, Kevin, because I'm with you, and except, and this coincided to some extent for me with COVID. All of a sudden, I was getting these jeans that had stretch material built into them, and so it became a little misleading because there was
I
a.
didn't say I didn't do that.
Okay, there you go. So
Okay. Yeah.
keeping it
Okay.
keeping it totally real.
Keep it till as long as the number doesn't change, I'm okay with a little stretch action on it. Okay. You mentioned eating well also, and these days there's a myriad of different, diets that people ascribe to. Do you have anything for yourself?
I do. And I also have a secret weapon because my wife's a nutritionist.
Oh,
But
beauty.
her philosophy is one that really resonates with me, which is to not really jump on these fad diet bandwagons, but you have a lifestyle where that is characterized by moderation. And if you want to indulge a little bit on the weekends or on vacation, you can. So we don't eat red meat. Um, uh, I personally try to minimize my carb intake. That doesn't mean I don't have carbs every day. I absolutely do. And um, I'm talking here about specifically bread and pasta and things like that, which, don't work too well for my body type. So I'll have that a couple times a week, not every day. But fruits, veggies, eggs. Um, I do like my scone or muffin with tea around 3 or 4 o'clock. Don't get it every day. I'd like to,
Mhm.
but that I would say characterizes my diet. I don't eat after 8.
Yeah. Yeah. Friends and family relationships. What are some of the habits you talked about your family within the first show somewhat, and you also talked about like right now you're in one of your busier times maybe ever. I'm sure with the book and a lot of opportunities around that. So what are you doing to keep what habits are you employing to keep your relationships in the health you want them?
Well, I find it really amazing that one of the best predictors of well-being is maintaining good, high-quality relationships, and I definitely try to implement that finding, so to speak, in my life. And so I will either call or text with my closest friends and family on a daily basis. So multiple times a day, I'll often be back and forthing with some of that close inner circle. When I'm home, obviously spending a lot of time with my kids and wife as well. And when I'm traveling, I'm often on FaceTime and maintaining those social networking habits. My social relationships definitely bring great joy and meaning to my life, and so I value them dearly.
I mean, your work is, I mean, obviously I've got your book right here in my hand, and you didn't just write that for fun. You wrote that to influence people. You are influencing people. That's why you're here on the show. And so one of our spokes that I often ask about is habits and what you do in a spiritual context. But I've also been including with that, or started to just recently, of also, if there is a spiritual aspect, great, but also just a cause. What is the habits you do to really sow into the greater vision, the greater purpose, the cause that you feel called to, in essence? So however you want to share with us on that one.
Well, growing up, my dad, who I was very close to, when we used to talk about, like, hey, what should I do when I get older? The message he always gave to me is, whatever you do, make sure you're helping people in some way. And it's not a very specific set of instructions for what to do, how to find a job, but like, I think many of the basic messages our parents give to us early on, that has always stuck around in the back of my head. And so, while I went to graduate school, got training in psychology and neuroscience, like, it wasn't specifically, I'm going to learn how to do this and then help people. I've always had that motivation hanging out in the back of my mind. And so, whether it's teaching undergrads or graduate students, or mentoring students, or now trying to take what we know about the science and share it with the world, that is a personal motivator for me. I derive real joy from taking what we know, with all the warts that may characterize that scientific knowledge, and sharing it with folks, with the hope that it will not only be interesting to them, but may actually provide people with practical, actionable information they can use to improve their circumstances in some way. So that's something that gives real meaning to me, or provides me with a real sense of meaning.
Well, in that, I'll ask, with the book Chatter, who was the avatar you were writing to? I mean, you've got your family, you've got, students, you've got the culture at large. What was on your mind as you penned this book?
It was the culture at large. It was going beyond the scientific field. And the hope was that Chatter would end up being a book that I could show to any one of my scientific colleagues and hold my head up high in doing so. And I genuinely feel that is the case. I'm happy I've given it to lots of colleagues and so forth, but they can read the articles that are filled with, obnoxious levels of jargon, and not because we have to do it, right, in statistics. But I was writing this book to get these findings out into the world. Yeah. And there's actually a specific experience that motivated me to do it. I talk about it at the end of the book, which was a student asking me one day in class,
right,
hey, why didn't anyone teach us about all the stuff that I talk about in Chatter? Why didn't anyone teach us about this stuff earlier if it could make a difference in our lives? And I did not have a good answer to her question. And so, in part, Chatter was meant to answer that question, which is, hey, this human mind we possess, it's the quarterback for everything, right? And so we've learned a lot about how to harness it, how to manage that mind, and in particular, that voice inside our head. And if you want to understand how to do it, here's what we know.
And I appreciate you divulging that. I don't normally jump to the back of a book, but after a couple of chapters, I did jump back to the conclusion section and read that, and just appreciated your own candor and humility in showcasing that. Well, you talked about right now being an exceptionally busy time, and with the book coming out, what are some of the habits that you are relying on now, employing now, to discern the breadth of your career currently? I'm sure you've got more opportunity than ever, and yet time is finite. You do have a family, you've got your own health and wellness. What are you doing to keep your career in the healthy path you want it to be?
I try to really focus on the opportunities that are most exciting, and the people and jobs that are the most important. So
Yeah.
that's a way of me triaging work, because there is not enough time to do everything. So I'm really deliberate about um, figuring out where to put my time. That's number one. Number two, I try to have fun with all of this. There are new opportunities that have come from the book, and I view this as just like one really interesting ride that has the potential to help others and be really fun in the process. And so I try to not take it too seriously in that regard,
Yeah.
and that takes the edge off as well. And let's see, if I'm traveling, I try to also not go too far off the bandwagon. I find that the more days I'm on this planet, the harder it is to recover if I go on a kind of um, off of my routine binger, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so I still try to get some exercise in when I'm away, and not have too many unhealthy meals.
So you mentioned fun. That's where we end on and anchor this one. And it's just kind of the personal spoke of life, whether it's self-care or fun or play or hobbies or interests. What inspires you? What do you keep partaking in to keep you the joyful Ethan your family loves?
I cook every day. I love
Yeah.
cooking. The more complicated the recipe, the better. I take a bath every single night religiously, to the amusement of all of my friends.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's
But
that's different. Okay.
but it's a way of actually reflecting
Huh.
and reading, and just kind of leaving behind some of the work, and just um, getting in some fun time in the mind. I spend time with my kids, and I try to, on the weekends, take a pause from work. Not entirely. I keep some time on the weekends for just doing fun stuff,
Yeah.
like fun work, but not the drudgery stuff, and hanging out with friends. I would
Yeah.
say that's the formula for me.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you. Thanks for the behind the scenes look and hitting on this again as we look at the chatter. It's going to be paramount to me as I look at some of my daily habits. What are the chatter that goes along with that? So thanks for your time again, and for being with us and sharing about you.
Thanks so much for having me, Kevin. Great fun.